We'll start with a histogram. That's just a bar chart, and on the x-axis have the class boundaries. The y-axis will have the frequencies. So we've got our boundaries, our frequencies. We've done this prior, so I've put all my information together, and you construct the bar chart as usual. Now notice one thing, your boundaries actually touch one another like this. So it makes sense that when you do the bars, you want your bars to touch one another. Okay, even though you're treating each of these like a category. So this bar here is the category 49.5 to 53.5. Okay, despite that, we do note that these boundaries touch one another. So we're going to get rid of these gaps between the bars. And so let's adjust this bar chart. So we're going to double click on any of the bars, and on the right hand side of the screen you'll get a pop-up called Format Data Series, and there you're going to get the option to change the gap width, and you reduce the gap width to 0%. So now the bars are going to be touching one another. The bars automatically, in my standard version of Excel, come up blue, but the borders do as well, so you can't easily distinguish between the bars. So what I need to do then is, under the border section, choose solid line and change that solid line to black. You can change it to any color, but black is nice. The resulting graph will look like that. So we can see that there are no gaps between the bars, and the bars have borders, so you can actually see the bars very clearly. There's the pattern we see in our histogram. Notice it goes up with the little peak, dips down, goes up to a higher peak, and then goes down and trails off to the right hand side. We're going to see that pattern just now in our frequency polygon. Our frequency polygon, simply a line chart. On its x-axis it's got the class midpoints. On its y-axis the frequencies. So the frequencies on the y-axis, that's just like the histogram we've done. It's the x-axis that's being plotted there that's different. So we have all our information, the midpoints, the frequencies, and we plot our line chart, and that's what it looked like. We do have a problem. Notice the ends of this line, they're not touching the x-axis, they're floating, and we want them to go down and actually touch the x-axis. So we want to anchor the line, or otherwise you can call it peg it, to the axis. So we have to make a slight change to what we're plotting. So notice what we've got here, this information. Okay, take note of that. And take note that that information is now in this white portion here. So what we need to do is we need to add another row before our first row, before our first class, and one after our last class. So we say now, if there was a class before our first class, its boundaries would be 33.5 to 37.5. We know this because with the boundaries, notice each time you jump by 4, jump by 4. So that's easy to get down to 33.5, and obviously 41.5, jump down by 4. And a double check, these two must be the same. And then if I had a class directly after my last class, its boundaries would be 65.5. The same as that, up to 69.5. Now I found that upper limit. Remember, we're jumping up by 4 units. Okay, because 4 units, my class width, remember, it's my C. Now, if I had this class right at the beginning, its midpoint, we can just calculate the usual way, lower boundary plus the upper boundary, divide by 2. So it would be 35.5. For that extra class at the end, its midpoint would be 67.5. another way you could do that. Remember, this will jump by 4. This will jump by 4. Very easy. You don't have to actually go and do the calculations like I did previously. Now, we know from the way we set up our frequency distribution that all 50 of our data points are here. So in this previous class that I've just put in, how many data points actually go from 33.5 to 37.5? None of them, okay, because they're all the ones I just circled. If we had this previous class, there would be no data points in it. And in this extra class at the end, how many data points are actually in this class? Well, there can't be any, because our last ones were in this class that goes from 61.5 to 65.5. That contained our largest value. So in the next class that we've put in there, there would be 0, the frequency of 0. So now plotting the midpoints and the frequencies here. Okay, so it's a line chart, so we can ignore those boundaries. I just put it in there so you could see the boundaries. So columns B and C. Now if we plot them with those 2 extra rows, your graph, as you can see, sorry we've got all the red writing there. Let's make that a bit darker. The graph goes and touches the axis, and it touches the axis there. Okay, sorry about my writing going all over the graph. Okay, so it no longer floats. Last one is our ogive. So this one here again is a line chart. On our x-axis we're going to have class boundaries again, and our y-axis the cumulative frequencies. Now the class boundaries on the x-axis are going to be treated differently from the way they're treated in the histogram. In the histogram, they've been treated like a category. The first interval is category 1, so it's got its bar. The second interval is category 2, it's got its bar. Here we're actually going to be plotting the boundaries as a point. Okay, so if we look at our table here, now ignore that added column for the moment. So here, rows 3 all the way down to row 9. That's all my information that I had in my frequency distribution. I've added an extra column, okay, column B. That's going to be for my upper boundaries. So all I've done is I've taken the upper boundaries from my frequency distribution, added them in this extra column here. So no extra calculations needed. I've just put those values in. Now, if I were to do a line chart using just this, so ignore that pink for now, we would get a line graph, but it would be floating, okay? It wouldn't touch the axis. So we're actually going to plot this lower point here, this lower boundary. We're going to plot as well. So let's suppose we had a class before this. So we know that this boundary, lower boundary, and this one's upper boundary would be the same. In fact, I think I've got this neatly. There we go. 37.5 would be the upper boundary of that class. The lower boundary would be 33.5. So we then copy across, that's 37.5. Now, if you had a boundary, this one that I've got, if you've got a class, this pink one, before our class that we've had. Now remember, our smallest values are in this class. So that means in this previous class, none of the values are there because we know all of our values are here. Okay, notice this isn't frequencies, these are our cumulative frequencies. Just take note, but we know that there are only values in these classes, not in this class before. So now that's going to allow us to anchor our graph. So steps 1, 2, 3 are the normal. So you select all your data and you go to insert, choose your standard. 3 here would be go to recommended charts. However, now you select the all charts option directly next to it. And from the list it gives you, you're going to choose your XY scatter. So we're going to do a scatter plot. Now at the top you can see all the different types of options it's giving you. We're going to choose the scatter with smooth lines. Okay, and it gives you sort of two options there. One has two lines on it, which is just looks odd because we know we're only plotting one line. So we're going to choose that option. And that will be your final ogive. Notice it is touching the axis. Okay, and very clear from here, you can see that there are no values. Okay, no temperatures below that value there. And if you go along nicely, you can see 50, the cumulative frequency. And our graph doesn't float, yay.